So if you're on this screen, because this is after you hit next, I think you did click on to next, right? So you're in here, and again, don't worry if you made mistake on filling out the initial information when you initially create the return, because you can always make some changes under the input return. So if you did want to change the social, the name, the address, whatever, you can change that. But that's not what we're here for right now. So if you're on the profile screen, I'd like you to go here under check return and then go to forms and then click on a US. And if you created a state return as well, it's gonna show here because US in ProConnect, that actually means the federal return. The federal return is the one that you will submit to the IRS. So in the tax lingo, Fed and IRS are the same thing. So if you talk about IRS or Fed, they're pretty much the same, right? So let's say, how about my federal return or my IRS return? Those are actually the same thing. So IRS covers the federal filing requirement. And if you talk about the state is where they're usually resided. And if they're residing in a state that requires a state filing, then they would have to also file a state return. So example, and you already know this, right? There are 50 states in the US, but not all 50 states require a state filing return. If you're in California, New York, New Jersey, I don't have the complete list right now, but you can Google this later. But what I can tell you is not all 50 states require a state filing requirement. Okay. So again, if you're in California, New Jersey, New York, those are states that require, those are the few states that require state filing. But if you're in Florida, Texas, then those states do not require state filing. Okay. So you have to look at the address of your client or of the taxpayer so that you know if there is a tax filing requirement. And normally, when you use a tax software that's pretty smart, as soon as you enter the address, the tax software would automatically create a state tax return. So you don't need to manually add it. It will get automatically added based on the input, right? I'm not sure with ProConnect though, but we can try. And just for a caveat, I don't use ProConnect that much, but we're using it because it's free for this demonstration. I'm not, let's say, as comfortable as like using Pro Series, UltraTax, CCH as compared to using ProConnect. But when you're knowledgeable in one software and you know the concepts of taxes, regardless of what software you use, you would be able to successfully navigate that software. And I'm going to show that to you. There are things that I don't know for sure where to look at, but there are ways on how to locate the things that you need in the tax software. And again, I will show you that. So just like you, I'm also still learning ProConnect. So also, if you may ask, what's the connection between a tax software and the tax return? Well, in the US, the return are usually e-filed. And when you e-file, it stands for electronic filing, okay? And that gets submitted to the IRS through a tax software. And these tax software, these are privately owned. And one of the owner of a tax software is Intuit. That's a company that created ProConnect, Pro Series, Lacerte, TurboTax. So they have several tax software. Now, if you've been practicing in the Philippines, it's kind of different, right? Because the BIR owns their e-filing system. And correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I have not been practicing Philippine accounting or Philippine tax. I don't think there is any other software that you can use in the Philippines to file a tax return to the BIR. Because again, the BIR owns their e-filing system. But in the US, it's different. The IRS also has its own tax software, but it's not exclusive, right? And most tax firms that you will be working for in the future will be using one of the tax software, and it's likely not the IRS. So the more complex the return is, the more sophisticated the tax software would be. So what is ProConnect in terms of sophistication? I would say level 5 out of 10. If it's only basic filing requirement, then ProConnect is suitable for it. But if you join a big firm, they don't usually use ProConnect. They use desktop tax software application, such as the ones that I mentioned, Pro Series, UltraTax, Lacert, CCH. Those are the big ones and more expensive ones. And there are desktop application. When I say desktop, they're actually installed in an actual computer, right? And you would usually access that software via a remote desktop. I'll show you an example of how that gets accessed shortly later. But for now, we're using ProConnect, and ProConnect is cloud-based. Cloud-based meaning you can access it via a browser. It doesn't have to be installed. And there are benefits of it because you can access it anywhere without the use of a remote desktop, because remote desktop usually require higher internet speed. So if you have a slow internet connection, that might be a problem for you. Okay. But there are several firms out there that uses ProConnect. So if you already are knowledgeable with ProConnect, and if we're successful with this tax course and you learn, you should be able to go out there and apply for a tax firm and tell the prospect employer that you're knowledgeable with the tax software. Okay. And again, like I mentioned yesterday, the good thing about ProConnect is that if you learn ProConnect, you will also likely gonna be learning easily, because Lacert is pretty much designed similarly to ProConnect. The interface is pretty much the same. I can also remind me to also show you Lacert at one point, how similar it is with ProConnect, because I have a client that uses Lacert, and I can open the remote desktop for you guys so you can see how the interface look like. Okay. So Sir Ronald says Drake. Drake is also a good software, although I don't personally like it. It's especially with clearing diagnostics, it's pretty confusing. But clearing diagnostics, that's something that we will also cover later. Yeah, Drake is a desktop application. So also a lot of clients use Drake. I hope everybody is in this section right here, check return. And then I would want you to go to the US tab and then click on Form 1040. Right. So today we're going to walk through the form. So the 1040 is actually just composed of 2 pages. And then depending on the complexity of the return, you may see several attachments. And we are going to cover those attachments as we go along. Okay? Again, depending on the complexity. If it's very, very simple return, then you would only see 2 or 3 attachments. But if it's complex, it may go up to 100, maybe even more. So we're going to cover those again later. But for now, I will like you to be familiar with the form and its different components. So let's take each one, and I'm not sure if we can complete everything today, but we'll try. Okay. So either you look at my screen or you look at your screen, doesn't matter, right? So if you're on your screen, you will see that the very first portion of your Form 1040 is the basic information of the taxpayer. So it's the name, the social, and if the taxpayer is married, you would also need to input the details of the spouse and the spouse's social. Then the address. So their address. So the address could be an address in the US or a foreign address. And then this one is a questionnaire that I would say 99% of the time does not get answered, right? But if it is specifically stated in the tax organizer and the client answered yes, then this should be ticked. But again, 99% this is disregarded. Okay, so don't worry about this. Copy so far? We'll cover this first, right? The information of the client before we proceed with filing status. Now, at this point, I will be sharing with you a video material that I lifted from Gleim, Gleim's Enrolled Agent course, right? So this is not my own video. This is a recording that I made out from the Gleim's EA or Enrolled Agent course material, which is very much applicable to the basic information of the client. Okay, so I will share that with you right now.
My name is JT Egan. I'm a clinical assistant professor of accounting with nearly 20 years of professional tax experience. I'm thrilled to be here with you to serve as your coach and mentor through the enrolled agent exams. I've been an actively practicing enrolled agent for many years and will share with you tips, tricks, and best practices to not only pass the exam, but to be a better tax professional. Let's get started at the very beginning and gather up supporting files from the taxpayer. All right, so there are a few things we should do as enrolled agents to ensure an accurate and complete preparation of our client's tax returns. All right, so let's pretend a brand new client walks into our office. We've never met them before. We have no idea who they are. I often say a good portion of my job is to be a detective. In order to best serve our clients and properly apply the tax code to their situation, we must understand their situation. So remember, we are generally trying to fit an entire year of a taxpayer's life on just a few pages. But beyond that, we may need to know what's happened in the past. Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And that is incredibly applicable when it comes to tax. We're creatures of habit. We like consistency. So let's ask our client for their prior year return, as well as any letters or notices they may have received from the IRS. Consistency can be key in tax, and the prior year's return will give us a great starting point. If there are major life changes like getting married, having a child, selling your home, we can start to highlight those areas. Now, we can rely on the prior year return to some extent, but we should apply something we call professional skepticism. Think of this as trust but verify, in that we should be very cautious and relying entirely on a return the client did themselves or maybe was prepared by someone else. The IRS may also have sent the client information, which we will understand better as we progress through the review. So next we are going to ask a bunch of questions that if we were in which we will understand.
So what he's trying to say here is that if the client is entirely new, that means someone else prepared their tax return in the prior year. So we don't have that information yet. And although, like I mentioned yesterday, taxpayers, as much as possible, they don't want to switch preparers because switching preparer means additional work or additional burden for the taxpayer. But it happens when, for example, the client is not happy with the service of the firm, right? So they switch from the following year. That's one. Second, if the firm goes out of business, the firm that used to prepare the taxpayer's return goes out of business, then they don't have the option but to switch to another preparer. Okay, so if we are the new preparer for the year, of course we don't have them in our database yet, right? So the very first requirement that we need from the taxpayer is their prior year return. And in line with this, I'm going to show you another video. This is an actual call that I made with a prospect client and see how I ask the question to this client. We will pause every now and then for some questions, okay? Because if your questions remain unanswered, it may hinder you from completely understanding the material. So I'll be showing you a video, and I'm not sure if Giovanni is here or you know Giovanni. He's just one of those who reach out to me through someone else. You know, the beauty of going out there and making yourself known is that you get referred. So someone referred Giovanni to me because Giovanni needs some help with his client's tax return. Giovanni is a bookkeeper. At least that's what I know. And he came to me, and again, he was looking to get some help with the need of his client. And you can do the same thing if in the future your bookkeeping client needs help with tax preparation, then you can come to me and we can work something out. And I didn't ask permission to record the call. I didn't ask Giovanni and Juan that I would record the call and I will share with you guys. But this is purely educational, right? So I hope I'm not, breaching any ethics and you don't take it against me. But yeah, I'll share this for the sake again of you understanding why I ask those things from this prospect client. I haven't closed any deal with him yet because he hasn't sent me those requirements that I need. This is just to demonstrate how to, I would say, do your due diligence when you're engaging with a new client. So, started as an S corp or a partnership. You guys can see my screen, and you are the only owner, correct? And hear the audio. Say yes.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll play it now. So just notice how I ask probing questions to the client so that I would know what he needs. Okay. An S corp or a partnership.
It's just an LLC.
And you are the only owner, correct?
Yes.
All right, so I guess in that case, we can further verify that later. But if you're the only owner and you did not elect for an S corp, you did not file a 2553, correct?
No.
So if you did not, then that is going to be a disregarding entity, which will file a Schedule C, which will be included in your individual tax return. So there will be no separate business tax return in your case. It will be a 1040 with a Schedule C.
Okay.
So last year, I'm talking about 2023, were you able to file?
Yes.
All right. And did the business already exist in 2023?
Yes.
So how was it filed? Was it also with the Schedule C?
Honestly, I wouldn't even know what it was filed under. Some lady she did everything for me from a remote, and she didn't even mention what she did. She sent me all the paperwork, but she just did it on her own.
All right. So I'm gonna need a copy of the 2023 tax return. That way we will understand how it was done last year and if it was done correctly. And also that would provide me an understanding of what your tax situation is other than your Schedule C. So maybe it's also best time to ask, other than your business, do you have any other source of income, like a W-2
No.
maybe?
No.
All right. And no 1099, like from a broker or from a bank?
Yeah, I get a lot of 1099s from different people that I work with.
All right. It's a 1099 NEC, correct? Being a
yes.
chapter. And you have all those for 2024 compiled, correct?
Yeah.
All right.
I should have them somewhere. They told me that I was able to go on a certain website and download the 1099s that I was received.
I believe you can pull up a transcript from the IRS website. That will be the best way to make sure that all the 1099s that were issued under your social security number will be included when we file your tax return. Because some contractors, they send a 1099 NEC to contractors, but the contractors don't receive them. But they also send a copy to the IRS. So the IRS got a copy, but the contractor did not get a copy. So that would result in a mismatch in the tax filing of the contractor, wherein there is an understatement of income as opposed to what the IRS have. So I would suggest I can send you the link after to get into the IRS database and pull up your 2024 wage and income transcript from there.
Okay, and that'll work even if I was because I have an EIN number, so I don't use my social. They send it for my EIN number.
Yeah, that should be okay. You can pull it up using your EIN once you get into the IRS database.
Okay.
Okay. So all the 1099s that were issued to you were using the EIN.
Yes.
Okay. Right. That's one. And have you filed an extension though for 2024?
No, I haven't.
Okay, in that case, you will need to have this done as soon as possible because from April up until now, you're incurring interest and penalties from the IRS for late filing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm available to, I mean, not busy these days. So if you want to go ahead and file the return with me, I've already mentioned to Giovanni how much it would cost. Then the requirement that I would need from you to get it started would be a copy of your 2023 tax return. And then if you can send me all the 1099 NECs that you got, and if you can also find the time to download from the IRS website the wage and income transcript that you received, just to make sure that what you will send me, the 1099 NECs would match with what the IRS have for you.
Okay.
Okay, and then if I can get everything this week, then I can say I can give you a draft of your return by Friday. That again would ensure that we can file your tax return as soon as possible, so you can save you on interest and penalty. Have you always filed your tax return on time?
Yeah, it's always been on time. It's just the lady that I was doing my taxes with, she was saying that she was doing my taxes based on other people's business, so I didn't like that because I think it wasn't getting me the fair share or whatever. I don't know how to explain it. I don't think it was getting my business what it was making, or she was going based off someone else's business. So I didn't like that, and I couldn't find no one to help me do my business. My taxes this year, so it's always been on time except for this year.
All right, then that's good to know. Because with you not being able to file an extension for this year, you will incur two things: a late filing penalty and an interest on the taxes that you were supposed to pay on April 15. So the penalty, we can request for an abatement if the past 3 years you have been filing on time.
Okay.
So we can do that later once you have filed your 2024 return. I can do it for you, or you can also call the IRS directly to request for penalty abatement. It's called the first time penalty abatement, and there's not any requirement except that you should have been able to file your tax return timely in the past 3 years. And that's it.
Yeah.
They can automatically waive that penalty for you. But the interest, no. But you will also know how much the interest is once we get your tax return finalized. Again, I can finalize it if I get the documents this week. I can get that done by Friday.
Okay, yeah, if you could just send me an email of the list of the items so I can gather the items and I can look for everything.
Sure. I can send Giovanni the list of things that I mentioned here in the call, and then he'll coordinate with you.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Is there any question you have for me?
No.
We're good?
Yeah.
All right. I guess that's it, and then let's communicate later.
Okay, I appreciate it, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Pleasure, one.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Chris. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Right. So that's for context. Notice that I specifically ask for the 2023 tax return, and then I ask some probing questions, what his income situation is like, so I know what else to ask of him, right? And in the call, he clarified that he did not file a Form 2553, which is an S Corp election. So he is filing his business as a Schedule C in his 1040 return. Schedule C, we will cover that later because it's part of the 1040. And because I'm already experienced, I know that if you're doing self-employment, you're technically a contractor, right? And contractors get 1099 NEC from their employer, right? Or whoever they're connected with. I asked him if he received all the 1099 NECs, and because he wasn't sure, That's why I asked him to download his transcript from the IRS. It's possible, guys. If once you're starting to work for as a tax preparer and the client is not sure if they receive their W-2, they receive their 1099, just tell them, don't worry about it. Go to the IRS website and download your transcript from there. Everything that was reported under the client's social will be reflected in the wage and income transcript. I just don't have a ready copy of a wage and income transcript right now, but I believe that Kelly is working for me. By the way, I will remind me, guys, to allow my team members to introduce themselves to you so that you know who to reach out if in case you would need a one-on-one support. Okay. So Kelly again is working for me doing tax representation. Well, he does a lot of things for me, and one of that is assisting me with a client I'm doing a tax representation for. And he's seen pretty much what a wage and income transcript look like, and we have copies of that in the database, and remind me to show that one time to you just so you understand what you would see in a wage and income transcript. You will see there a W-2, you will see there the 1099. Again, these income documents that were issued on the client's social security number. Yeah. For Mary, yeah, the Schedule C is for sole proprietor. Schedule C and S Corp or partnership, we will cover on a much deeper sense as we go along, because I don't want to bombard you with too much information right now. It might be too much for most of you. So yeah, so those are the things that I ask, and I ask probing questions. So I understand what the situation of the client is, and I know what to ask of him, right? So, and from there, the call wasn't exhaustive because there could be more requirements that I would need to ask from him once I receive the 1040 return for 2023, because he may say he only had Schedule C, but once I get the return, it may show that he has Schedule B for interest, Schedule D for capital gains. So that's why this guy right here, he said, be professionally skeptic. Now, don't believe everything that the client is saying, not because they lie, but because they may not be knowledgeable enough for them to share the information that you may need to prepare the return. You know what I mean? So don't take their word for it. Look at the tax return, right? So that's what he means by professional skepticism. And then you would need a very important information in the 2023 return. These ones, the carryovers, the credits, the overpayments. So there may be overpayments or there may be credits that were unused from the prior year. Especially the ones that are very common. The one that is very common is the carryover loss. So if there was a Schedule C loss, or there was a loss on, or there was a capital loss, that can be carried over to the following year. It's very, it's one of the information that you will get from the prior year return. And then IRS letters and notices. Yeah, we also ask this. This would indicate whether the client has existing balances or not. Okay. And the transcript also is covered in this statement right here. All right. And again, after this presentation, I will accept questions before we proceed to the next lesson. Okay. So make sure that you're jotting down your questions.
Better as we progress through the review. So next we are going to ask a bunch of questions that if we were conducting a job interview, we just simply could not ask. Some aspects of the tax code apply or do not apply, depending on facts such as age, marital status, dependents. We might look at the client's driver's license to help gather some of this data. We also need to ask the client if they are a U.S. citizen or what their immigration status is for the tax return. The client might give you their green card, which looks like this here. Alternatively, we might need to ask the client when they arrived in or departed from the US. So at this point, I want to caution you with the information you are gathering. A lot of this information is considered PII, or personally identifiable information, PII. Tax professionals are required to keep this information secure, and we must remain diligent at all times. While it's a bit early in our journey to talk about the exact requirements, we can certainly start to consider how we safeguard this information and keep our clients safe. All right, so at this point, we've got the basic identification information and can start to think about our mission and keep our clients.
All right, so here in practice, we don't actually ask for the green card. Rather, we ask for a driver's license because that already contains pretty much everything. I have not seen a green card that was sent by a taxpayer, okay? And PII, I would want to emphasize that. Social security number, their address, their phone number, those are their date of birth. Those are personally identified information. So you don't want to, compromise them. Okay, so be very, very careful with handling personal information of the client. Most of the clients have a secured portal, which I will show you later. So because email, as you know, is not secured, right? It can easily get hacked. So when we request these information from the client normally gets into the portal, which is a website where they upload their documents, and we receive them in our version of the portal. And again, I will show you that as part of this lesson, okay? What the CRM looks like and what information or how we store the information of the client, okay?
Safe. All right, so at this point, we've got the basic identification information and can start to think about our next questions for the taxpayer. The focus of EA Review Part 1 is individuals, and most are going to be filing Form 1040, which is generally due on April 15th. Depending on the client's situation, they might have other forms to file as shown here. So to help us determine what to file, we need to ask the taxpayer about their informational returns that they received. So clients often walk into my office and drop something like this onto my desk, just a big old stack of papers. And we've got a lot of information to comb through. The most common one that we come across. So clients.
All right. So I'll pause on this one. So these ones are the most common tax forms. Magbibisaya sana ako. These are the forms that you will see a lot. Okay? W-2 for the wage, 1099K for, usually these are for self-employed individuals. W-2G not so much, but these are for gambling. 1099B, there's this also a lot of it. C for cancellation of debt usually involves credit card. So if their credit card balances have been forgiven by the credit card company, they get a 1099C because it's technically an income. At 1099 div for the dividends, and then 1099T also very common because it's for their interest if they have bank deposits. And then miscellaneous income. This is for royalty and rent. Okay, so common ones that you will encounter. W-2, very, very, very common. That's the most common one.
Often walk into my office and drop something like this onto my desk, just a big old stack of papers. And we've got a lot of information to comb through. The most common one that we come across is the W-2, which is issued to the taxpayer by the taxpayer's employer. We might also have forms such as the 1099G for unemployment, or maybe a 1099K because the taxpayer was selling online. So here's a list of the most common information returns. Check your GLIME outline for even more. At this point, we might also be hearing from the client about their business if the taxpayer is self-employed. It's important for us to help distinguish between a business expense and a personal expense. Generally speaking, personal expenses, such as those shown here, are not deductible for tax purposes. All right, so recall that we asked for the client's prior year tax return. Now we can look at it with a little more detail to highlight things like a state income tax refund or capital loss carryover. We'll understand the tax concepts through future study units later in the review, but for now, we just want to appreciate the incredible value of this information. All right, so now that we have evaluated the information returns, such as a W-2 provided by the client, we can help determine what tax returns are required. Keep in mind, there are some very common tax returns, such as the income tax return, while other returns may be somewhat rare, such as requirements around foreign activity. We'll want to ask the client whether or not they had foreign activity so we can evaluate special filing requirements. If the client indicates they had foreign income, we may qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion. We'll understand how these rules apply in a later study unit. Having foreign sourced income is a really important question, but we must also ask about assets located in a foreign jurisdiction. Simply put, there are substantial penalties on both the taxpayer and us, the preparer, if we do not properly report foreign assets with an aggregate value in excess of $10,000 on what is called the FBAR, the Report of Foreign Bank and Financial Assets. We call it FBAR for short. This is a separate return, which is not part of an individual's Form 1040 filing. There is, however, a separate form attached to the individual's Form 1040 called the 8938. That's this one right here. This is the that is the Statement of Specified Foreign Financial Assets. This has slightly different rules for whether or not a taxpayer has to file the form, and it depends on filing status and dollar amount. Generally, however, if the taxpayer has to file the FBAR, they likely have to file Form 8938 as well. Check your GLIME outline for the most up-to-date filing requirement criteria. Form 5471 might also be required if the taxpayer is an officer, director, or shareholder in certain foreign corporations. Form 3520 might...
All right, let me stop there because I want to emphasize on something. So, by the way, guys, a little bit of caveat. On the call that I showed earlier, if you are employed by a tax firm, you don't do that call, right? Unless you're doing tax preparation yourself as an independent preparer. So you don't do that call. It's usually the owner of the firm that does it, and you're just given the documents. You log onto a portal, you see the client's documents, and then you just prepare the return. I just don't want to overwhelm you, And right now, if you've been bombarded with too much information, we're just starting, okay? You will get more clarity as we go along. So I would say, don't worry about it. Take it easy. If things are not yet making sense, it will make sense as we go along, especially when you're already starting to prepare the return. Okay. And I want to touch on this presentation right here in terms of FBAR, because this is also important that we need to cover this with the client, especially if the client is based abroad or they have investments abroad. So I used to work for a firm specializing on foreign earned income exclusion. So these are US taxpayers who are based outside of the US. So the US is one of the very few countries that tax their citizens regardless of where they are, right? So whether you're in the US or not, you would still have to pay your taxes to the US government. Okay. And how you do that is you file your tax return. But there are incentives for those who are abroad or who are living outside the US. They get exceptions, right? So there's about $105,000 that they can take away from their income, so they don't get taxed. If their income is more than that, they can avail of tax credits. That means if they already paid taxes in the foreign country where they are living, they can apply that as a credit. And if none anymore to exhaust, they will have to pay tax on the excess. All right, because you already know the repercussion, right? If them not filing, they may end up with their passport getting revoked, so they can't come back to the US anymore. If the IRS is able to track their income, that's something that they will face a consequence for at a later time. Then that's why you will see a lot of Americans when they retire, or like a lot of digital nomads, those guys in IT, they relocate outside of the US because they end up not paying taxes, right? Because of the foreign earned income exclusion. However, they have to make other filing, right? And one example of that is FBAR. So FBAR is if the client had, or the taxpayer had, a bank deposit, which at one point during the year, it reached the threshold of exceeded the threshold of $10,000, then that taxpayer has to file an FBAR. So even if at the end of the year, let's say December 31, 2024, the balance is $1 only, but say in June 1, there was a deposit of say 11,000. So that taxpayer will be required to file an FBAR. And an FBAR is not a tax return, it's just informational, right? But even if it's informational, if the client fails to file FBAR and it's willingly not filing it, because if they fail to file and they realize they made a mistake, they can always file late. That's fine. But if the IRS finds out that, no, it's not the IRS, it's FinCEN, it's another agency. If FinCEN finds out that they're negligent in their filing requirement, the penalty for FBAR is $10,000 minimum for every year that they fail to file. So it's a big penalty that will hit them if they don't comply. So again, this is a separate filing requirement. Form 8938 has a different requirement, but it's higher, and it depends on the status of the filing status of the taxpayer. If it's single and living in the US, and married living in the US, and then another amount that's for single or married living outside the US, mas malaki yung threshold doon. And it's attached to the Form 1040. So ganito yung dapat tandaan. If may 8938 requirements sa client, most likely, or actually definitely, mayroon din siyang FBAR, right? But if may FBAR siya na requirement, it may not necessarily mean may 8938, because the 8938 again has a higher filing threshold amount. Okay, I hope that's clear with you guys. And how do we get to know these, right? So I'll show you a tax organizer that specifically asks that question. So this is an actual tax organizer from the firm that I used to work before. So we send this through the portal, and they fill it out. They give us their information along with their other documents. And this is how we get to know their situation. And there is a specific question here that asks that question. So sure. So this question: did the combined maximum balance of each of your foreign financial accounts? So the question goes: did the combined maximum balance of each of your foreign financial accounts, whether you are an owner on the account or have signing authority directly or indirectly through one or many layers of other legal entities, such as ownership interest in a corporation, exceeds $10,000 at any point in the years you are filing? If the answer here is yes, then he will have an FBAR filing requirement. Then you would need to send him an FBAR questionnaire. Okay? But in this case, the client answered no. Right? So direct or indirect, say for example, the taxpayer is married filing separately, and the wife is a foreign national, and then yung wife may deposit na nag-exceed ng 10,000, and then yung husband who's a taxpayer, for example, and who's filing with us, is a signatory, although hindi siya owner, but he's a signatory, then he would need to declare that in his FBAR. Okay, so ganun ka-strict yung requirement. And then, so this is an example of a tax organizer that's Excel based. So this is really old school, but I'll show you another tax organizer that's not necessarily old school, which is web based. Let me see here. Where did I save that? And at this point, I'm going to show you a CRM, which also is very nice if you learn, because every firm uses CRM. So I have not encountered a firm na walang CRM, because again of the PII, again the personal identifiable information of the client, they cannot send those through email. Okay, so each firm has a CRM, and maraming version ng CRM out there. Mayroong TaxDome, marami dapat I can't recall, no? TaxDome, there is Canopy, there is Teamwork, basta marami. Pero yung pinaka-common na CRM that I feel like you should also know, kasi maraming firm ang gumagamit nito, and usually firm na nag-hire, they actually ask for it if may experience kayo sa ganitong CRM. And that CRM is called TaxDome. So TaxDome, it looks like this, right? So TaxDome looks like this. And TaxDome has a tax organizer template that, the firm can use. And if, say, a client has filled out a tax organizer, it's going to show here, right? It's going to show here. So client logs on to the portal, TaxDome din, but he has a somehow different interface and fills out the organizer. And then we get notified if it's already completed, right? I'm not going to open this because this is an actual client and you would see the PII of the client, and we
Ay,
don't need,
nagdamba sa ate dito, Joy.
and we don't want to do that.
Ano
Okay,
nakapon?
I'm just showing you how a
Nagkapon dito,
CRM looks
basang-basa.
like, and particularly TaxDome. Okay, so maraming features ang TaxDome, automation, and how we communicate with the client, how we request documents from the client. And that's something that you would also want to learn. I don't know if there are tutorials in TaxDome, but usually it's not a deal breaker if you don't know how TaxDome works, because may mga training naman, and then you would also, if magaling kayong mag-navigate ng mga websites, it's not easy, it's not difficult to figure out. But I'm just showing it to you and telling you that what's a CRM for, so that if it comes to a conversation, you have an idea what it is for. So it's for secured client communication and document repository. Okay, so lahat ng mga documents na sinend ni client, it's gonna be stored in the cloud, and the way you would see them in the CRM is through the docs. And this is also how we share documents with the client. Okay, this is how we communicate, this is we share. This is to avoid using, let's say, Google. Let's say instead of using Gmail to communicate, instead of using Google Drive to exchange documents, we use the CRM instead. So that's how we collect information from the client. The reason, PII. And one client told me that, because he was a CPA, one client told me that if an SSN of a client is emailed, pag in-email yung SSN ni client, the penalty of that CPA could be a license revocation. So that's a really big deal, kapag nalaman ng state na nag-violate ka sa PII, that could mean a revocation of your employer's CPA license. So careful tayo dun. Right. So 5471, these are for US people with foreign corporations. Medyo madugo itong tax return na to kasi kailangan talaga ito ng accounting background. Kasi may income statement, balance sheet, tapos maraming finifill out na form. And I'm not very experienced on this one. I haven't dealt with so much of 5471, but it's also good to specialize on this. Maraming mga advanced or mga, I would say, malalaking firm ang usually gumagawa nito, 5471 and 5472. Let's continue.
One might also be required if the taxpayer is an officer, director, or shareholder in certain foreign corporations. Form 3520 might be required if the taxpayer is the executor of a U.S. decedent's estate and that estate has foreign activity. And finally, to wrap up potential foreign activity reporting, we've got to ask about the taxpayer's interest in foreign partnerships. There are 4 categories that might trigger filing requirement. Check out your GLIME outline for those filing requirements. My friends, I can tell you from practice, this is one of the best tables for your consideration. This is the personal and financial changes table, and it's right out of your GLIME outline. While we haven't reviewed how these items impact an individual's tax return, it's important for us to take note that these are life changes which will impact a tax return. It's important questions for us to ask as part of our preliminary work to prepare tax returns. All right, onward and upward. Thanks for watching.
Right. So these are things that, would really be helpful to know. And dapat naka-capture to sa tax organizer na questions. So lifestyle change, meron bang change in the filing status? From single naging married ba? Or from married naging divorced ba? No? Was there a new kid that was born this year or during the tax year? Kasi that's going to be additional dependent. Meron bang namatay? That could also be one. Was there a purchase of a new home? Usually makikita yan pag may 1098 na sinend si client. And again, we'll cover that as we go along. Retirement, if nag-mention si client, nag-retire siya. Remember, in the tax organizer, there is this question where we ask them to tell them about themselves, their income, this is where they typically tell us a bit of a story of themselves if they're a new client, or changes from the previous year to the current year. And usually also, if the client has changed there are significant changes in their tax situation, they would proactively mention that in the tax organizer or in the communication, right? They will communicate that, hey, I got divorced, blah, 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 and I got a new dependent, or we purchased a new house. So, because those could trigger new or additional requirements. So, wage income, if, either of the spouse stop working, then you would have to ask for a 1099G, which is an employment benefit. And anything that has changed from the prior year to the current year, these ones would need to be taken into account because this may add additional requirement from the client. Because here we're not talking about new client, we're talking about existing client. So a lot of these things, I'm not going to go through one by one, but any change that will impact their tax return will also trigger additional requirement, additional document. Okay, but most of the time, the taxpayer would already provide you that information proactively. Okay, and sometimes when you encounter documents, that's when you ask if it was not proactively given. Okay, so if you now start working as a tax preparer, what you usually do is sa TaxDome, which is the CRM, you actually get assigned work, right? Usually you get the task here, right? So this is my CRM. These are my tasks. I got 14 tasks, right? And then it goes around. Like after I'm done, I send it for review and I update status. So the CRM also works like that, right? It manages a workflow, and you also get your inbox internally and all other stuff, right? So when you start working, the CRM is your go-to site to check if you've been assigned a new return, or was there a feedback on the return that you prepared. or was there a communication from the client, or if you received the document that you requested from the client. So basically, it's your workplace. The CRM is your workplace, right? Because like we work remotely with a client. So ideally, what you do is like on the first day or on the first thing of the day that you do is you go to your CRM, check for any inbox, see if you have been assigned a new task, right? Then that task is usually to prepare a return, right? So once you're assigned the task to prepare a return, you look at the client and see if the client is a new client or an existing client. If it's a new client, you look at the tax organizer and you check if the documents have been submitted. If the documents are not there, then you request the document from your client through the CRM, right? So your life pretty much revolves around the CRM and the tax software. Those are the two things or the two software that you would usually use when you're doing tax preparation. So requesting documents, getting documents, everything is in the CRM. And some firms even, don't require you to communicate with a client. So everything is provided to you in the documents tab. So all you just really need to do is to prepare the return. And once you're done with the return, you hit, done, and then submit it for review, right? Once you submit it for review, if your supervisor or if the owner reviews the return and they have questions or feedback to you, they will just send you a notification through email, or they will, if you have a work paper, which I will show you late as we go along, they would also make notes in the work paper, right? So that's how it works. That's why as a tax preparer, you don't really need to be working the same time as your client, right? So this is where you can own the time, because well, not everyone, not all firms would allow you to do that. Some firms would require you to work US hours if you're in the Philippines, so that you can communicate with them real time. And these are the types of firms that are micromanaging their teams, right? So even if things can actually be worked on remotely at like 100%, but they still would want you to work hours so that if they communicate to you, you can respond to them right away, and they also monitor your time. But there are also firms, a lot of the firms that I work with, they don't really care what time of the day you work, because you're given an expectation as to when you can finish the return. So usually it's not like a day after you will complete the return. Usually you're given 3 days to complete the return, because sometimes there's lacking documents that you need to request from the client, and sometimes the client don't even respond timely. So it could go on for weeks, even months, that the task is gonna linger in your CRM. And the client understands that, that you don't really need to be working the same hours as them, because everything is done online. So if you have a question, the client can respond to you, whenever they can, right? And you can check it whenever you can. You can respond whenever you can. It's not like you message now and then you should respond right away. It doesn't work that way. Yeah, it doesn't have to work that way. So if you're lucky, and especially during the interview, if you are asked if you're able to work US hours, just be honest about it. If you can't, you can say, I would prefer to work at my own time, if it's Philippine time, if that's okay. And if the client is not okay with it, then find someone else. But usually, again, clients, especially if they know that you're already very capable and you have shown responsibility, some clients, like, you would start with US hours, but then after that, once they already get a comfort of how you work, then they trust your work ethics. They will trust you with, you can work at whatever time, and because this is where productivity and output base come into the picture. So it depends on how good you are, how efficient you are with preparing returns. One return you can use, if you're already knowledgeable and experienced enough, you can do in like 2 hours, in even an hour, right? But if you're completely newbie, a one return could take you 1 day or maybe 2 days, right? So at the start, client may ask you to work same hours as they are, so they can support you real time. But and based on also on your performance, they may change your schedule, just to allow you to be able to get regular sleep at night. And that's gonna be up to you how you perform. But I'm telling you, there are firms that don't really require you to work at night, because if some Americans, or some of the firm owners, they're they feel ashamed or embarrassed to ask you to stay at night to work for them. I mean, at least based on my experience, they don't want that. But then again, there are also firms who insist on working US hours. So dyan napapasok yung luck, on finding that client. And also, it's not, for me, it's not luck. It's really how you work, how you communicate. Because once you strike a chord to your client or your prospect client, that you're someone who's responsible, accountable, and knowledgeable, then you can demand your time, not them, right? So I get this question sometimes when I talk to client would ask, okay, Chris, what time do you usually work? Right? So I get asked what hours I work, not like, Chris, can you work on these hours? Right? So only because I have the experience already, and because of that experience, it gives me that confidence when I speak to them, and that confidence strength, I would say, manifest, and they can see that, right? And that also compels them to somehow show you respect. How we show respect is respecting your time. You know what I mean? And you can get there. At some point, medyo ang baguhan tayo, yes lang tayo ng yes sa client, right? But at some point, we become assertive, right? Not aggressive, but assertive, wherein we communicate, openly what it is that's in our heart and what's in our minds. Kung ayaw talaga natin ng oras na yun, we can openly communicate. Okay? So, yun lang. Message ko lang doon is, galingan nyo, no? Para maka-work kayo at your own time and at anywhere. Kasi it doesn't care kung saan kayo, di ba? For as long as natapos nyo yung return, right? So that's the use of CRM, guys. So I know that there's like a firm na only ito lang naman yung alam ko, isa lang naman. Yung like when you're working, kailangan yung mag-zoom and then mag-share ng screen. That's grabbing micromanagement na yun. As in, isa lang naman yung alam ko. But the rest, hindi. They don't care like what you do and, how you do it, for as long as nade-deliver nyo naman yung tax return on time. Kung hindi, may mga reasons why. All right, side bit lang. Please TaxDome. I'm just reading through the comments here, or the questions. Do spouses file separate returns? I'll cover that in the next lesson, which is the filing status. Okay. In the US, spouses can file separate returns, but most married couples file jointly because it usually results in lower overall. Yeah, that's right. But again, we'll cover this. There's a separate topic which comes after this. But yeah, that's for the first section of the Form 1040, which is this. Bakit ako napunta dito? All right, let me go back to this example. So those are ways we can obtain the information ni clients through the previous tax return and the tax organizer, and through the CRM. Kasi kung hindi provide sa tax organizer, we ask the client the information. Okay, but everything that you need, as far as this is concerned, you would get from the prior tax return or the tax organizer. And where you fill this information in is here. So you go to input. So now we're doing entries, okay? Unless you have questions. All right, I think my question. So this is a time where we ask questions on the first material that I've shared. So we can after this, we can proceed with entering the information. So Princess has a question or a remark. Let's see. In filling out the 1040, do we still need to enter the spouse's name and SSN even if the filing status is married filing separately? Well, the answer is yes. So even if it's married filing separately, you still need the spouse's information. How would you know po if may unused credits or carry forward items sang part po ng return nila sila makikita? Kung it's capital loss, you will look that up in Schedule D. So sa Schedule D, and I think may schedule na specific for a carry over loss. I don't know, or I don't recall exactly what the form is, but this is where, Perplexity can help. By the way, I'm sharing with you, I use Perplexity a lot. It's like a chat GPT, but more of summarized yung mga answers niya. So answer your question, to be very precise, let's ask Perplexity what form to look for carry over losses. So right, see Schedule D for capital gains and losses, only just for losses actually. And then I know there is another one. Yeah, this is just one on top of my head. What about for business losses? Yeah, so for business loss, it's Form 461 for a net operating loss. And usually, these ones are only gonna matter if tayo yung nag-prepare ng return ni client last year. Okay? So we need to be checking the prior year return for any carryover losses. Because if existing client naman si client, yung carryover losses, automatically magfo-flow yun sa following year's return sa tax software. So you don't have to worry about it. Okay? So again, kung existing client na, yung client na wino-work on mo na return, all those carryover losses will automatically flow through to the next tax year's return. Kung new client, that's what you look for in the prior year tax return. Clear? Right. So third question, may na-review or audit ba sa US firms for their processes, like kunwari po if they use CRM or not? The IRS don't do audits of CRMs. They audit tax returns, only tax returns, right? And it's usually the responsibility of the taxpayer. So kapag na-audit ang taxpayer, it's another engagement that he needs to sign up for sa tax firm. So kung ang tax firm ay nag-sign up, kung may, usually firms are providing additional services like an audit protection plan, wherein kung tayo na firm yung nag-prepare ng return ni client at na-audit yung return, right? Na-audit yung return, we can represent the client or we can help the client with the audit sa IRS for free, right? Because may audit protection plan. Pero kung wala, then the client will need to sign a new engagement with us for us to be able to help them resolve or address the issues with the IRS. Because remember, before we file the tax return, the client signs the return. That means he agrees to the return that we prepared. Okay, so ang responsibility ng return is with the client. So kung na-audit man yan, mali yung mga deductions na naka-reflect doon sa return, it's not going to be the responsibility of the preparer because we only prepare the return based on the documents that the client has provided, diba? And the client signed the return, that means he reviewed the return. Okay? So, yun. Ang audit is not on the processes, but on the tax return itself. Fourth question, once a foreigner gets the EA license po, will he be subject to US taxation? Let's say he's working for a US-based firm, but he continues to live outside US. My difference in terms of US taxation in case he works for a firm as an actual employee or as an independent contractor. So ganito yon. If you're an EA who's based in the Philippines, wala kang SSN, wala kang ITIN, you will not be subject to IRS taxation. Okay? And how you get a SSN? Kung may green card ka or kung passport holder ka, which not going to be the case. So no. How do you get an ITIN? You have to apply for it. So once you apply for an ITIN and you get approved, then you will be subject to US taxation. If you don't have an ITIN and you have an SSN, you will not be employed by a US firm. Hindi ka magiging employee. You would only remain as a contractor. Kasi for US firms to hire an employee, you must have an SSN. Okay? So I hope that's clear. Kung wala kang SSN, wala kang ITIN, you will not become ever an employee of a US firm. So you will not be subject to US taxation. Coach, in the tax organizer, is there a way in which we can have a one-size-fits-all organizer for all types of client? Yes. So there's only one organizer that you usually send to the client. If a portion of the organizer it does not apply to the client will just put an A, right? So it's an exhaustive list wherein, again, if the client is not dito, if yung question na yun is not applicable to the client, in A lang or blank lang yung nilalagay niya. So, my answer dito sa Miss Josie, sa spouse ng SSN, kung may SN naman yung spouse mo and you're filing separately, you can put the SSN, right? NRA lang if non-resident alien yung spouse, right? So this happens if, let's say, in common case, like an American living in the Philippines filing a tax return, married siya, Filipina yung wife, and yung wife walang SSN or hindi nag-apply ng ITIN, then the wife's name still has to be listed on the return, but on the SSN portion, NRA yung pwedeng ilagay. Okay. Unused credits or carry forwards are found on specific credit forms, schedules, or prior year returns. Yep. U.S. tax authorities do not audit firms' internal software. Foreigners with EA license working remotely outside the U.S. generally are not subject to U.S. tax on that income, whether employee or contractor, depending on residency. Yeah, medyo confusing though. But just so you remember, if you don't have an SSN or an ITIN, you will not be subject to U.S. taxation. Coach, in the tax organizer, is there a way in which we can have a once? Okay, I already answered that. Is Perplexity paid or free? It's free, but you can subscribe to it for, I think, more features. But I have not. So I've been using it free. Oh, is this the first time I heard about Perplexity? Thank you. Yeah. So I use Perplexity a lot. And a lot of the people I know in the tax industry also use Perplexity. Alrighty. So any more question before we proceed? Grabe no, 7, 8, 9. Before you know it, it's already 9. So there. Again, if we go here, it's a form, and we want to fill out, the first portion of the return, we want to go here to input return. And then this is where you will enter. We will test the ProConnect if it's smart enough to detect whether the taxpayer has a state filing requirement, okay? If, for example, yung address ni client is in California, select this state, CA, on top, which says resident state as of December 31. So CA. And there's an option here to indicate whether that client was a full year resident or a multi-state, part year resident. For example, first half of the year, client was living in New York, and then second half of the year was living in California. So as of December 31, resident siya in California, right? But he was not a full year resident. Rather, he was a multi-state resident, right? And this will later trigger another state filing requirement. Depende. Kung, let's say, yung prior state niya was New York, for example, na may state requirement, or it could be Florida na walang state requirement. Okay? So that way, we need to manually enter another state. But in this example, let's say we use California, and we indicate that the client was a full year resident. And gawin lang natin simple muna yung return. Let's use single, right? And then, hayaan nyo lang na invalid value yan. Occupation, may mga software na nagka-cause ng diagnostics kung empty yung occupation, but it's really not important, but if the client provided their profession and we know what the profession is, we put that profession in. And also be mindful of the, I would say, the input convention of your client or the firm that you're working for, because some clients would prefer the inputs to be all in capital, and some clients don't like all capitals because it's so like blinding to the eyes, right? So be very conscious. Like if you see prior year returns that were prepared all in caps, then you have to be consistent. Enter everything in caps. But if you see naman na hindi, formal type lang yung input, then follow the same. Again, be consistent. So, and will not put date of death, dependency status. We'll tackle this later, but for now, let's skip that. This is when, someone else can claim you as a dependent. So usually these are for like students, because we will cover, there's another topic for dependents, which we will cover exhaustively. But there are filers who are claimed as dependents. And one example of that is a student na nag-work at the same time. So kung student ka, pwede kang i-claim as a dependent ng parent mo, but you also file your tax return kasi may work ka. And then you need to file the tax return to file a refund, right? So for you to, when you file your tax return, you want to make sure that you indicate that you are, you can be claimed, you're claimed as a dependent on another person's return. And then these ones are not applicable. So let's say for our state, let's be consistent. We're using California. Let's say this is Los Angeles. And let's say 1-1, just make out any 5-digit zip code. And then let's do that. Just make out any address, guys. Should be okay. And then the rest you can leave blank, right? So once you're done with the basic input, click on review return, and then you will see that there's already an input on the first portion of your return. So let's wait for it to load and then go to 1040. Bakit hindi nag-reflect yung aking address? Refresh forms. And it's already smart enough. See, hindi naman tayo nag-create ng state return, pero automatic nag-create si tax software ng California state return. And a California state return is form 540. Ano ko lang is, bakit hindi nag-reflect yung address? Where I input naman ako ng address. Let's go back here. Check return. So either you hit review return or you go here to forms and then click on this one here. All right, now reflect na siya. So that's the address, right? So on this side, we're already good. We are able to input the basic information of the client. And now, as you can see, meron na tayong CA return na na-create. The only thing that we did there was in the input return, we indicated that the client was a resident of the CA or California state for a full year. Okay. And how do we know these things? Again, in the tax organizer and the prior year tax return, if it's a new client. But if it was a prior year client, all this information would have already been available because it was rolled over from the prior year return. Kailangan nyo lang i-review because possibility is baka nag-change ng address si client, diba? So that's why you want to still look at the tax organizer, compare it with the prior year return, and see if there was a change in the address. And what else could have changed? Yung filing status, diba? Baka sa updated tax organizer ni client, ang nilagay niya married na siya, then you will have to update the filing status and, of course, input the spouse's information. What will not change? Date of birth. Of course, mag-change pa yung date of birth. Yung social, hindi yan mag-change. Diba? Profession can change, right? So these are things that you need to confirm if these have been updated by the client in the tax organizer. So every year dapat nag-fill out sa client ng tax organizer, right? Kung hindi, need mong i-confirm kay client if prior year information is still the same. Okay? Clear so far? Did you get to it? Did you get to this point where, let's see, kung I refresh ko lang yung return. Na-refresh pa yung address. Alright, congratulations. Meron akong address. Happy guys so far?
Yes po.
I don't feel so alone. Diba? May yung iba nagpapakita ng video. I appreciate that. Yung iba naman mapakita naman kayo. Makita ko yung mga reactions ng mga faces niyo. Wag tayong masyadong serious.
Kailangan pala sir, malakas ang internet, matagal siya mag-load.
Kasi ano to cloud-based lang siya. So, it helps na okay yung internet connection. Alrighty. So, now when you hear the word tax organizer, it's not going to be a stranger to you, right? You would know that that's where you will get the information ni client. Diba? Again, and other than that, you would also get the the prior year return. And then, it matters yung state, diba? Kung fully resident sila sa state na yon, then we've covered CRM, anong purpose ng CRM. And then, very important thing na tandaan, yung personal information ni client. Bakit kailangan natin gumamit ng CRM? Bakit hindi natin ini-email yung mga documents? And, due diligence, collect the documents relevant to the client. So, ang tawag ko dito before, when I was conducting training sa mga staff ko is that before you work on any return, kilalanin mo muna yung client mo, get to know the client, and understand his tax situation. You know what I mean? Hindi ka didiretso sa documents, hindi ka didiretso sa tax software, aralin mo muna. Tingnan mo yung prior year return para makita mo anong filing status na, anong address niya, anong income situation niya, and then go to tax organizer. Check kung may updates ba sa tax organizer. So from there, alam mo na what to expect. Diba? Pagkakita mo, ay, simple return lang to, W2 lang, madali lang to. Diba? Pero pagkatingin mo ng tax return na inassign sa'yo, ang daming pages. May Schedule C, may Schedule D, tawag dito sale of home pa, mga ganon. So alam mo na, it will take more than 8 hours to prepare. So you can already expect bunch of documents, di ba? Kasi nakita mo na yung prior year return, di ba? You know what I mean? So para alam mo na, like start of your day, ilan yung returns na pwede mong i-prepare. So pag tinanong ni client, okay, how long will this take you? Pagkakita mo sa return, ang dami naman itong return na documents na to. So sabihin mo, I think this would take me maybe a day or two because there's a bunch of documents involved. And especially kung hindi ka familiar sa mga documents, you can always use perplexity in that case. Pero pag simple lang naman, pwede mo sabihin sa client, I can do it in 4 hours. So you can expect to have this reviewed by end of the day. Something like that. Para you get to set the expectations by client. All right. So the one that you did, remember that because that's going to be our work in progress. Okay, so you've already entered the basic information and I hope that siguro para uniform na lang tayo. Keep the state the same, California. Keep the filing status single. You can copy exactly what I have here or you can modify, but important thing is that pareho tayo ng filing status, single, and state, okay? Because that will matter. I will let you know later. Actually, as you browse through your Form 1040 right now, empty lahat except for your standard deduction, 14,600. So naka-default yung 14,600 sa filing status na nilagay mo. So kung ang filing status ni client married filing jointly, mag-iiba din to, right? So one thing that you ought to know if you're completely new sa tax preparation is that you don't need to do any calculation at all, right? Wala kang need to do any calculation because the software will do it for you. Okay? But if you do it correctly, you will get the right calculation. Kasi pwedeng magkamali ka. How? Instead of single, nilagay mo head of household kasi I don't know, for whatever reason. Nilagay mo head of household. Mag-iiba na ngayon yung tax ni client kasi mag-iiba yung standard deduction. Iba ang standard deduction ng head of household. Right? So, in tax preparation, wala kang computation na gagawin, but it matters if you're careful with inputs, right? So, that is why this is open to anybody. Like, kahit wala kang accounting background or kahit, you're very, very poor at math. But if you're very detail-oriented, if matyaga ka, you can be a tax preparer because all these things you can learn, right? The concepts, the theories, you can actually learn. And you will later on realize, input lang naman pala to. Alamin mo lang ano yung form, saan mo ilalagay sa tax software, at alam mong paano i-review yung return on a high level, right? So, ganun ang tax preparation. Hindi siya ganun ka-complex, hindi siya nagre-require ng, high level of thinking. Sabi nga nila, it's not rocket science. So, it's a good opportunity for everybody. Kaya nung yesterday when I presented the audience for this training, I specifically put there that is open to anybody. So now you're realizing it's that easy, right? But it can get complicated. It can get complicated. But mind you guys, not everyone's tax situation in the US is complicated, right? Marami dyan na W2 lang. Marami dyan na 1099-R lang. Marami dyan na, as in super simple returns. But why are these simple returns kailangan ng help ng tax firm owner? Kasi kung tax firm owner ako lang mag-isa, and I have like 200 simple clients, hindi ko pwedeng gawin yan lahat during the tax season na ako lang. Diba? Or siguro, it's not a good use of my time as a tax owner na ako pang mag-i-input ng W2 ng mga 1099 ng tax organizer for my client. It's no-brainer. Diba? So, as a tax firm owner, kung gusto kong mag-grow, mag-hire ako ng tax preparer, 'di ba? Then alam ko naman na yung tax returns ko ay simple lang. So if I put my job post there sa Upwork or sa Online Jobs PH, I will not put, kailangan CPA, kailangan EA kasi alam ko na simple lang yung return na piniprepare ko, 'di ba? But I need to hire someone to do it for me because I don't want to do it anymore. Like, again, because it's no-brainer. It's not a good use of my time. Gusto ko magre-review lang ako. And the time that I would, save from entering the data into the software is grow my business, meet with clients, meet with prospect clients, mag-expand ako because I get help already. I have someone from the Philippines, for example, who's doing the data entry for me. You know what I mean? So that's the value proposition that we can provide to our prospect client. Like, when you are on a call, ang tawag nila dito discovery call. I have never done a discovery call before. But if you're in talks with a prospect client, that's a value proposition that you can provide, You can tell the client, I can save you time because I can do the data entry for you. So, and I'm also going to be learning in the process. I know the basic simple return like W2, 1099, because you will all learn about these terminologies later on. And I can do those data entries for you. And all you get to do is, review the return. And if there's anything that, that was missed out, at least you've saved 80% of your time. You know what I mean? Because that's what I also do, right? Why I hire people to work for me is instead of me doing the data entry for the returns, I hire someone else to do data entry for me so that if I work for a firm, instead of spending 8 hours for the firm, I would save 6 hours because I don't do the data entries anymore. I do 22 hours to just review the return. So you see what I mean? That's the value that you can present to whoever you want to work for. And mind you, there's a lot of firms who need that help. Okay, so much for that. Let's see if you have any questions, clarifications before we move on. Right, so all good tayo. Dito sa form, everyone was able to fill in a basic information of the client. Everyone was able to see a California state return. Meron bang nag-struggle dyan? Or yung iba baka they're already playing around? That's fine. If you feel like you can already start to play around. I'm not discouraging you from doing so. Kasi what we're doing is really basic to cater to the needs of those newbies. But if you're advanced and you already know these things, feel free to play around. Then let's spend the next 30 minutes with my teammates who will introduce themselves to you guys, where you need, because like you're so advanced already and you prepared a tax return, like you have done all your data entries and you need help with, say, clearing the diagnostics or figuring out if you did it correctly, then you can reach out to any of them and request a time with them. And like what I said, the course is free, but if you would want a one-on-one coaching, then that's not going to be free. You'll have to pay the staff an hourly rate, which they would tell you if you reach out to them how much. And the coaching and the one-on-one is open. I'm open, but I'm telling you that the price may be a little expensive if you do it with me. And second, I'm not as available as my other team members. Okay. And then some team members here are more experienced than the others, so the rates also vary. Okay, so yun lang. Let's go back 9:30 for the intro on the team members, and let's spend like 30 minutes for that. And kung gusto niyo pa, we can continue up until 11 to do the filing status. Short lang naman siya. And then we can end there, and then by tomorrow we can resume cover the standard deductions and then the dependents. Kasi what we're gonna do is we'll do it step by step, right? Because we're going a walkthrough of the Form 1040. Una natin yung personal information, and then we're gonna cover filing status, and then we'll focus on standard deduction, then dependents, and then we'll go through each line item here, the W-2, the interest, dividends, the IRAs or the 1099Rs, and then this one here is a portion for the capital gain. And then this Schedule 1, Line 10 will cover the Schedule C, Schedule D, or Schedule D and Schedule E. And then you have tax on credits, that's another portion. And then these payments up until we get to the refund or the tax due portion. Okay, so that these components of the 1040, and piece by piece we are able to input them into the tax software so that you be in a position to say, oh, okay, this is what the boxes mean in the forms that you will be encountering. And then once we're done with all the inputs, we will review the return together at a high level. And one thing that you'd also know is that when you look at the check return, you have your diagnostics. We'll also look into that, how you can clear the diagnostics. So these are indication that you made some mistake in the return. If you see a lot of red, it could be a mistake or could be a missing input. So the tax software is smart enough. All tax software are smart enough to tell you or to provide you guidance if you're making a mistake or if you're missing key information that the return needs. So that's your guide. And you would not be able to e-file a return unless you clear diagnostics. The ones that says fatal and EF critical diagnostics, these are important diagnostics to be cleared so that you can e-file or submit that return to the IRS and the state. Okay, we will not be doing e-file, but we're going to clear diagnostics so you would know, because this applies to any tax software. Attendance check tayo sa team. Kelly, are you here? Please, I'm sure you're here, right? Queenie, are you here? If you can message in the chat, Queenie, or she's also known as Jade. Janelle, if you're here, send a message at chat. Who else? Janelle. Andre, of course, are you here? Maya, if you're here, please message the chat. Then, okay, Kelly is here. Zara, of course, is here. Para lang alam kung sinong una kong tatawagin para mag-introduce. Or baka nag-break pa or nagkape. Sunday kasi ngayon, guys. So, but I asked them to come. If not, they're not here today, then that's fine. Okay, Jade is here. So maybe we can start with you, Jade. If you can show your camera, that'll be nice so we can see your beauty. And up to you how you present yourself. Give it about a minute. Kilala ka lang sa team. Right? You wanna go ahead? Okay, wala daw siya camera. Right, yeah, that's fine. You don't have to show your face siguro, but if you can unmute yourself. So for now, maybe we can move to Jen. Jen, can you start with introduction? You have a camera, right? Okay, Jen, you want to go ahead? Or maybe Zara. Okay, Janelle is here. Okay, Jen, go ahead.
Kita na ba? Wait.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay. So hi everyone. I'm Jen. I'm a single mom and an undergrad of BSed English. I'm one of the Borderless Accountants tax preparer. I started working as a store cashier before jumping into the world of the education. As per Sir Chris introduced me into this field of work. With Sir Chris, good mentorship and reliable resources, I started working as a tax preparer at BA last 2023 of December. So it's my second year of doing tax preparation such as 1040s, 1120s, and 1065s using several types of software such as UltraTax, ProConnect, Pro Series, and others. Though I have learned little by little about this kind of work, I'm still continuing to learn and also, there are lots of things to learn fast. So, I'm hoping that we can learn together and we can get along together in the future. And also, I kept saying, because it is the way it is. Let us keep on learning about it. So, I guess that's it. Thank you for listening and God bless us.
All right. Thank you, Jen. So if I may supplement, so Jen, initially I hired as a cashier. So a little bit of background. She came to me last year, oh no, 2023. She was looking for a work, and of course, because she didn't have a tax background or an accounting background at all, I thought of, you know, she's one of the reason why I put up a store, no? I opened a store para lang may ma-provide ko akong work sa mga nag-apply. And she, because there were, I think, couple of them who applied for work. And little by little, I observed their work ethics. I did operate a sari-sari store, but I did infuse some technology there. So meron akong G-sheet monitoring of their sales and their cash reporting every end of their shift. And so far, nasusunod nila yung mga formulas. Because I didn't expect them to know G-sheet or Excel at all. But, in a span of, I think, 3 months, I noticed that they've been so consistent and they've been showing initiative. And so I think December, I told, there were two of them. I told them na maybe you can try attend the training so you can help us with tax preparation. And it started with that. I showed them the video on how to enter. And it was, I remember, Jen can confirm this. I remember it was just 2 weekends of them looking at the videos that I showed them, and I gave them access to the tax software. And on that Monday, they were already doing tax returns. So that was just amazing. And that's like kind of a realization for me that if Jen was able to do it, anybody can do it, right? So Jen has been great help. She helped me with various clients already. And I told her this, that my goal for her is, because she's doing inputs only, right? I never had the time to really sit down with Jen and show her the whys, the the one that I'm sharing with you right now is slightly different and slightly, I mean, it's actually so much better than how I trained Jen. Because the way I asked Jen was the way I trained Jen and the rest was show them how to do it, show them how it's done. But the principle behind it, I never get the chance to really, explain to them the way I'm explaining it to you right now. That's why I also want them to attend, because my goal is for everybody in my team to have their own client, to be working directly for a client. So I hope for Jen and the rest of the team to be in that position. Okay. So it's just a start for them. They're also learning in the process, like what she said. She's learning, and every day is a learning experience. And we're growing. So if Jen again was able to help with tax return preparation, everybody can. She's proven that. We're Bisaya, by the way. We're based in Bohol, so very Bisaya. So if that's also why I'm speaking to you in English, because it's so awkward for me to speak straight Tagalog, right? So that's why don't get intimidated if you ask questions and you don't know if you need to speak in English. You're not required. You're not required. You can speak Tagalog or Filipino. We will understand. We will respect that. The only reason that we're speaking in English is that's where more most comfortable. Hindi naman pwedeng mag-Bisaya kami because not everybody will understand, right? So there. Bohol, and me personally, I also am based in Cebu. So Zara is in Cebu, but she's also like going to Bohol every now and then. In last tax season, we were based in Lapu-Lapu, so we stayed in Lapu-Lapu for like 3-4 months. But we go home to Bohol is home, basically. So there. So that's Jen. Glad that you're able to meet her. Then who wanna go next? Zara, you wanna go next?
I think I can. I think I can totally relate with Sir Chris, because I am also Bisaya, and I think if magtatagalog ako, parang super awkward, parang si Ninya ang show. If you guys know Ninya, you know what's up. Okay, so I am 21 years old and my name is Zara. Before Cebu, I lived in Dumaguete for a couple of years. And then before Dumaguete, I am originally from Iligan City. And then before that, I finished my senior high school in the United States as a scholar by the federal government. And so how me and Mr. Chris met is actually a little bit unexpected, because last year I decided to accept a job offer from JP Morgan and Chase, and I was looking for a place to rent. And then I stumbled upon Sir Chris's listing, and then I started staying at one of his condos in Cebu. And then after some time of working at the office, I feel like it's been dragging a lot of my energy out of me. And so I was beginning to feel very drained. And so naturally, I had to choose myself over money, because if I die, nobody else is gonna work for me. I mean, duh. So ayun, I contacted Sir Chris, not really because I was sure that he needed somebody in the team. And then thankfully he did. And so we met at Seda Ayala, and then we discussed what he needed from the team most. And then now I am currently the social media manager of the page. So yung the person chatting with you guys sa group chat gamit ang Borderless Accountants, that's me, as well as yung content creation recently in the past month, that's also me. And at the same time, I am also the person assigned doing tax follow-ups for our clients. So yeah, I think I am proud of where I am now. I think if I remember correctly, I was feeling very hopeless to get into the remote working industry, kasi hindi naman natin made-deny na a lot of freelancers, and we can't blame them, okay? I just want to put that out there. We can't blame freelancers, but a lot of them they tend to shut the door off once they've got into the industry na parang once they're in, goodbye. Like find another door yourself. Thankfully, Sir Chris doesn't like to make it that way. He wants to make it as open as possible, mainly focusing on the skills that you already have and allowing you to learn and absorb more of the more possible skills that you could be equipped by to stay relevant in the job market. So yeah, yun lang po. Thank you.
Thank you, Zara. Really well said. Also, again, to add some context to what Zara already said. So Zara rented one of my space in Cebu, and she was working for JP Morgan, and I was surprised when she reached out to me. She said could she possibly join the team? She's very interested, and she was one of those na member ng team na nag-reach out initially. And initially I say I didn't say yes because walang opening, and but I told her I give it a thought. I'll reach out to you once I can come up of something, and that's how it usually start. I already shared this with you yesterday. Now, God is so good. Pag may nag-reach out, I don't usually say no right away or yes right away, but I'll remember it, and usually things either my client na darating and which I needed help for, or I can come up with something na pwedeng makatulong ikaw. And so I knew Zara is really good with com skills. I was impressed, and she doesn't have an accounting background at all. I think her background is pol sci. And so we talked, and I presented to her my vision and told her maybe you can help in this area because this is where I'm struggling with. Like, I have a page, but we can't post something that is, aligned with how I want it to be. And I feel like because she understands my vision, she was easily able to work with me to help improve the page, right? And create contents that's aligned with how I wanted it to be. And I'm very happy with her help. And because of her com skills, she's also able to help me with the follow-ups with the client. Because when you speak with Americans, you have to also have a really good com skills to tell them what you need from them. And if you're able to speak to them, you're able to navigate the conversation pretty well. And in that area, she's also very helpful. And she's also learning tax. She's joining this training because she's also learning, because she also wants to try, doing tax preparation. Because also the goal for her is not just work for Borderless Accountants, but also get a client of her own, and that's not impossible given her skills, and that just goes to show, guys, that, I really want to live up to the word borderless, accepting of anybody for as long as, we're aligned in terms of our vision. All right. So that's for Zara. I want to go next. Okay, sino mag-volunteer? Jade, were you able to figure out the camera issue? Or Kim, you wanna take the spot?
Sige, sir.
Yeah, Kim or Kelly.
Someone is messaging si Krish. Yes, it's me.
Yeah. You wanna
Yes.
go ahead? Do you wanna go ahead, Kim?
Sige, sir. Okay ba? Lain man ako, sir. Di lang ko mag-show sa ako answer camera.
Okay, up to you. Go ahead.
So hello everyone. This is me, Kelly Joan Cano. So sa first session ni sir, nabanggit niya na may staff siya na kapitbahay, so it's me. So before I started Borderless Accountant, I was an operation manager before in an export industry. So I really thought that I would settle in that company kasi I'm comfortable enough. But then there are some issues like family issue yung father ko na hospitalized. And I never thought na ganun pala yung feelings na you knew that you're one of your family na nagkasakit. So I don't want to overthink myself. And since Sir Chris nag-reach out ako sa kanya na if ever I can apply, and then later on, my prayers get answered. He messaged me mga 12 a.m. ata yun or 3 a.m. no madaling araw, and he said na iha-hire niya ako. So I was very much thankful about that, and thank you so much for the opportunity, Sir Chris. And so as of now, I'm doing sales tax return and also doing US tax preparation and the representation that Sir Chris said a while ago, and also bookkeeping. So I think that's all for me, sir. Kulbaan ko.
Yeah, I think we always get that, right? Especially if we're not used to, facing a crowd like this. But yeah, thank you, Kim. So his name is Kelly Joan, but he goes by the name Kim as well. His family calls him Kim, but I call him Kelly. I don't know. Because Kim is what, 24? And we're literally neighbor, like next door. Kasi if you imagine a province, right? Yung bahay namin, separated lang by anong English ng basak? Basa-basak. It's a rice field. So only a rice field separate our house. And he's young. Like when I was living in our province, I think he was not yet born. I don't know. So I never really got to know him. So when I came back in Mabini 2 years ago, yun, isa siya dun sa mga nag-send ng resume or nag-express ng interest to work. And I asked him what his background was. And at that time, I didn't have a need, right? And also, he was going to go back to Manila because he's going to continue working where he was. But he wanted to go back because, he wanted to be with the family. And so I told him, I didn't say no, but I told him if something comes up, I'll let you know. And so I asked him when he's going to be able to come back. And he said it was going to be October. And I asked, or I thought about it because October, hindi na tax season yan. Wala nang, kasi October 15 yung deadline, di ba? And he said he's gonna come back. He intends to go home second week din ng October. So wala na talagang work, right? So that's the downtime for us. But I prayed about it, Lord, I asked the Lord that if you would give Kim an opportunity to work for the firm, then do something about it. So I lifted up to him. And true enough, after our conversation, may nag-reach out na client sa akin na sales tax, like yung monthly requirement na sales tax na hindi kailangan ng iba naman tong sales tax. We will probably cover it another time. But monthly yung requirement ni client. So, nag-reach out to si client sa akin ng mga July. So, I studied and I gave it a go. Then I was doing it initially. And then I thought of Kim. If I can assign this to Kim, then, I can give him a job. So, cut the story short, I asked him, can you come home? And then I have a job for you. So we started with that. So few months yung he was only doing sales tax. Kasi wala ngang tax requirement when he came in, October, November, December. And then in January, I asked them to join me in Lapu-Lapu kasi I want them to be working with me during the tax season para matrain ko sila. I can give support real time. And I was very surprised with Kim's performance. Alam mo, from sales tax, he was doing tax return, multiple software. He was very flexible. He was even able to do tax representation. And he was also able to help me with doing bookkeeping using QuickBooks Online. So, that simple yes to him turned out to be a huge blessing for me, because he really showed really good work ethics, very flexible in terms of learning. Ang bilis niyang natuto sa tax return, are doing tax return and even tax representation. He's like jack of all trades, and soon to be master of all, So ganun yun. It was a blessing to have him, and of course everybody in the team. And that's to also show you that Kim did not have an experience with tax preparation at all. But he was able to learn it and how training and actually doing it. So it could also happen to you. So thank you, Kim, for that. And who wanna go next? Maybe I'm seeing Andre. Andre, do you wanna go next?
Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Naririnig ako, sir. Okay. So, hi, everyone. And my name is Andre, and I'm 27 years old. And so, a little background. I started my career back in 2021, and I'm working as a runner, like license officer for a businessman. And so my main job there was to run errands for him and also process documents like business permits, fencing permits, and anything that he wants me to work on. And I was also a student of Sir Chris, um, who gave me the opportunity to work for him that time part-time. Then that time I need to stop working as an runner because I'm a student who will have a review. So I need to work, but I also need to work and to have my like allowance. So that time Sir Chris is hiring and I get the chance to work with him as a partner part-time. Then it is really advantage for me because the work is flexible. Then I work for him as a bookkeeper that time. And when I graduated, so Sir Chris referred me to a firm and and also was luckily uh accepted by that firm. And that time I also Sir Chris also invited me to go to Bohol. So it was a big change on my decision. It was, I think it is the biggest decision of my life to go out or to go out from my comfort zone because I'm from Cebu. Then I need to go to like another island to work with him because Sir Chris really like to work with kana yung magkasama talaga kayo kasi mas madali yung learning process kasi every time you have a question you can tap on him and say what is how do you do this, then he can answer directly. And the learning, it will not be di siya mapuputol, or the what do we call that,
The
the
momentum.
the momentum, yeah. The momentum of learning ay talagang straight talaga. Tapos, mas mabibilis kaming matuto. So, then I worked as a bookkeeper for 6 months. Then, I shifted to tax preparer. Then, that time also, um, another chance and another opportunity bring and nag-hire yung another company ni Sir Chris. So, na-refer na din ako ulit. Then, luckily na naman, natanggap ako as a tax preparer. So I really like my job as a tax preparer slash bookkeeper because the flexibility and control over my time. And eventually I also started taking on clients, like my first client, then my next client. And it really changes my perspective on work that anywhere pala or makaka-work ka. So I think that's all for me, Sir Chris, and everyone. So I'm looking forward to work with you all.
Thank you, Andre. Really appreciate that. So again, to add, Andre, yeah, he used to be my student, but that was online, so I never got to meet him face to face. And then he got referred by his friends who were already working for me. So I needed another help at that time, so I tapped into him. And then there was an opportunity from the firm that was working with, and I referred two of them kasi nag-need ng bookkeeper, and I referred them, natanggap silang dalawa. So they were no longer working for me, but they were working with me in that firm. And then I eventually invited them to Bohol only during the tax season kasi 'di ba pag tax season tuloy-tuloy yung work, ang daming work, and I wanted it to be closer to them para mas matrain ko sila, mas may support, no? Hindi again, yung momentum is tuloy-tuloy. And yeah, and Bohol is also a nice place, so medyo gumagala din sila every now and then when there was a chance. And that suits everyone's lifestyle. And si Andre na lang yung natira sa mga original kong mga angels kasi yung mga babae, multiple clients na sila ngayon, like the way I told you guys. So si Andre na lang yung natira. Although Andre has his own client as well. But he chose to stay, and I really appreciate that as well. And I think it's also God's way of us still working together para mas we learn from each other. Like Andre and myself, we review returns together, and Andre can attest to this. There are things that, although matagal na ako sa tax, I only stumble upon some items recently, and natutunan na lang din on the fly. So that's what we do. I work closely with Andre in terms of mas complex na returns, complex na client, because he's more experienced. He's been doing it for 2 or 3 years already. And Andre kasi is my accounting background. No, he graduated accountancy, hindi nga pa lang siya pala nag-board. But in terms of his wavelength, mas align kami. So yun, pag complex na return, siya yung pinapahandle ko, and mas super bilis din matuto. And yeah, he's more senior, so if in case you need support, especially like he's very well versed already with CCH, Lacert, Ultra Tax. I say 70-80% of what I know, Andre knows. So his more experience, again, if you need one-on-one and more complexing situation, and either I'm not available or it's your preference to go with someone else, Andre would be your go-to person. Okay, so you have access to them. Meron sila sa GC, meron sila sa email. You can reach out to them and make an arrangement. Okay, and you can pay them directly. I told them whatever pay that you get from the one-on-ones goes to you because time nyo naman yan. Because you don't want to be, I can offer my services for free, but I don't want them to be offering their services for free, okay? Because they don't earn as much as I do, right? So, kasi ganun din siguro yun, no? Fair naman siguro yun na when you want their time, you have to pay for their time. I hope that's okay with everybody. Okay, so that's Andre, and if you want to get to know more him on a more deeper level, again, you have access to him. Yeah, so that's Andre. Who else is there here? Jade, you ready? And then I think we have Maya. Maya, if you're here as well, we would love to have you introduce yourself as well.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
All right, go ahead, Jade.
My name is Queenie Jade Espinosa from Bohol, Bisaya din. And I was former OFW from Hong Kong. Pero as malayo ka sa pamilya, so it's very hard working, especially kung may magkasakit sa pamilya, yung homesick mo doon. Grabe talaga. So, uwi ko dito, nagtambay muna ako. And then, si Sir Chris nag-conduct ng training for bookkeeping. Pero ako, wala talagang background. Walang accounting background, as in zero. Nag-train ako, then nag-reach out ako sa kanya. And then after a year, siguro, this February lang ako na-hire. Bagong-bago lang. Tapos, na-train niya ako dun sa Cebu. Ngayon, ginagawa ko is yung tax preparation and may konting bookkeeping. Tinuturuan pa nila ako. So, I'm still learning and I hope that I will grow together with them. And tayo. That's it. Right. Yun lang
All
po.
right. Thank you, Jade. First portion, which is the personal information ni client. Now, I think we still have time. Maximize na natin to. Tuloy-tuloy na natin because after this, we'll meet daily, 8 to 9. Gawin na natin ng 8 to 9 na schedule. And again, if others can't join, that's fine. It's going to be recorded. And the recording will be posted sa Facebook community. If you're not yet a member of the Facebook community, please join because that's the only place we will be posting the Zoom recording, and that's to compel all the participants to be part of the community. Okay, because we're growing the community, or we aim to grow the community. And I already shared that with you yesterday because we're trying to build a talent pool, right? And we want to pick from that talent pool if there is a need. So it'll be nice to have everyone in the community. And I don't like the word exclusivity, but the community the contents there are only for those that are engaged in what we do, right? Unlike when it's pasted in the page where it's accessible to anybody, right? Anybody who don't have anything to do with the tax prep, right? So it will be posted in the community, and if you can do the honor in pasting the link to the community to the chat so that those who are not yet a member can join and then can see the recorded materials there. And for those who were not able to join today, if they reach out to any of you, direct them to the community so that they can access the recording, right? Because they don't want to miss, because a lot of people are gonna miss some of the lessons, right? Like some of you would probably miss the daily session. So that you can still catch up, just watch the recording. And I would advise that you watch the recording prior to the live session. So you're not left behind or you don't feel lost in the discussion. And before I forget, every day, starting tomorrow, we will have a quiz, right? It will be done online, live. So that's to test your understanding of what we've covered the previous day. So tomorrow's quiz will cover the first part, the getting to know the client, and the filing status, which we will cover later, shortly. Okay, so that's a quiz, and it's not, like a school type of quiz that, my grading and stuff, but it helps me to already see people who are excelling, because part of what we do is talent pooling. And, for those who would need a job, later on, if there is a job requirement, then we can match you to that job, right? That's one purpose of that. So, and also for you, to gauge your own understanding in, absorption of the lessons. All right, so expect the quiz tomorrow, and there may be a prize for the winner. Who knows? Right, so that's it. And then we'll now move forward to the second lesson, which is the filing status. Unless you have questions, clarifications.
So we've discussed the preliminary work to prepare tax returns, and you'll recall that there was a lot of personal information. Let's take a look at Form 1040 to see our next steps. So here's the latest individual tax return, Form 1040. And I can tell you from practice that this overall look and feel of this tax return has not changed in many, many years. So up top, you'll notice right here, we've got a lot of information that we've looked at from the client, their name, their address, and continuing down the form, now we get to see filing status, and filing status is right here. So the most common filing status that I see in practice is married filing a joint return. And we often abbreviate this status to just simply MFJ. Married taxpayers technically have a choice to file a joint return where income and expenses are combined, or to file separately. We'll understand later why most married taxpayers choose MFJ, and spoiler alert, this filing status typically has the lowest tax liability for our clients. Now, both spouses have to agree to filing a joint return, and it actually doesn't matter if only one spouse has income or both. There are, however, a couple of rules we need to be aware of for MFJ. First, we look at whether or not the taxpayers were married as of the last day of the tax year, typically December 31st. This is actually kind of neat because the tax code then treats you as if you were married for the entire year, having just gotten married on December 31st. Now, you think this timing rule would have the opposite effect in the event that one spouse passes away. But interestingly, as long as the surviving spouse does not remarry before the end of the year, a married filing joint return can still be filed for the year. For tax purposes, you must be legally married and cohabitating with your spouse, which means living in the same household, or if you're legally married and living apart, but not technically separated under a divorce decree, or the taxpayers are separated under a divorce decree that is not yet final, then a joint return is eligible. If we have a situation where one spouse is a non-resident alien, then both the U.S. citizen and the non-resident alien spouse, or NRA spouse, must elect to be taxed on their worldwide income. So in order to be eligible for married filing a joint return, one spouse cannot have already filed a married filing separate return. We'll cover that filing status in a minute, but if one spouse did already file a married filing separate return, then the other spouse likely has to do the same unless they qualify for something known as head of household. Don't worry, we'll cover head of household filing status too. Generally, taxpayers can go from married filing separate to married filing joint, but interestingly, not the other way around. If a marriage is annulled, which effectively means a valid marriage never existed, then the taxpayers would fall under either the single or head of household filing status. Also, the word joint in married filing joint doesn't just mean filing together. It actually means that any taxes that are due, interest and penalties are the responsibility of both spouses, regardless of which one actually earned the income. This is why both spouses sign the tax return. So here's the signature portion of the tax return at the bottom, and we would sign right there. This is kind of a scary proposition if you have some distrust between spouses, but the tax code does have some relief from joint and several liability available to a spouse that just may not have simply known what was going on in the case of, I don't know, let's say tax fraud. This is called innocent spouse relief, which is different than injured spouse relief. Injured spouse relief happens if one spouse has some outstanding tax debts. The withholding of the other spouse without the tax debts might be able to recover some of their tax refund instead of it being used to cover the other spouse's debt. All right, so we've mentioned this fund instead of an injured spouse, just kind of a ability of either these. If one spouse U.S. citizens, you must be.
All right, guys. So just a little bit of emphasis. So MFJ, that's, if you hear the word MFJ, that means the abbreviation for status married filing jointly. And this is the best filing status because it provides for the greatest standard deduction amongst all. But of course, not everybody can file MFJ, right? If you're single, you cannot file a married filing jointly. So you will qualify for an MFJ filing status only if you are married, right? So it doesn't matter if only one has an income. It's even better because then you get possibly a refund because, again, of the greater standard deduction. And if one spouse died during the year, unless the surviving spouse did not remarry, meaning hindi siya naghanap ng bagong asawa, that person can still file MFJ for the year, right? Just for the year. And then another status for the remaining 2 years, which we will cover later, if, again, the spouse did not remarry. Even if you got married or the taxpayer got married December 31, 2024, for the whole year 2024, you can file as joint, right? For as long as you're married on the last day of the year, of the tax year. You have to be legally married, and even if you have filed for a divorce, if the divorce was not yet final, then you would still have to file married. There are people who file like separated na sila. They live in different houses already, but they want to maximize their deduction, then they can file married filing jointly. They can choose to file married filing separately, though, if they want. That's an option. And then common, again, for married Americans whose spouse are non-resident alien. Non-resident alien meaning they are not U.S. citizen and they live outside the U.S. So typically that happens in the Philippines, right? A lot of Americans marry Filipinas. So they want to maximize their deduction. They can file a married filing joint return. And for that to happen, they need to apply an ITIN for the wife, right? And that will subject the wife to US taxation. So it's not going to be very, it depends on the situation of the client. It's not always advisable to do it this way. So I have a client before who's married to a dentist in Cavite ba yun? So he's married, so he choose to file separately, not MFJ but MFS, because the wife was earning a good amount of money as a dentist in the Philippines. And if he files a joint return with a wife, that wife's income becomes subjected to US tax. And even the bank accounts of the wife will also be subjected now to an FBAR filing requirement and possibly an 8938. So the American husband did not want to subject the wife to that, so he chose to file married filing separately to protect the wife's income from getting taxed in the US. Copy? So that's for the NRA. But there are cases wherein it's beneficial. Walang work si wife, 'di ba? Typical Filipina housewife. Si husband medyo malaking income, for them to maximize their deduction, then they will have to file a married filing jointly. And then I encounter this as well. Some clients, just because they have a Filipino wife and they're married, they will put in their tax organizer single. Magpa-file daw sila ng single. And then makikita mo dun sa supporting documents, married pala siya kasi meron siyang Filipino wife, di ba? Dun sa tax organizer. So, pero single yung nilagay niya sa tax organizer. So in that case, you have to explain to the client that, hey, you are technically married, even if it's in the Philippines, that's recognized in the US or anywhere in the world. If you're married, you have to file married filing, either jointly or separately. Hindi ka pwede mag-file ng single. Okay, so yeah. And let me know if you have any questions, okay?
Legally married and cohabitating with a divorce decree that is spouse or don't worry, we'll
So there's something I want to emphasize here. Itong innocent versus injured spouse relief. So may mga cases kasi na like yung husband or yung any of the spouse ay nag-misrepresent ng tax return nila. So kunyari na audit ng IRS and na find out na fraudulent yung tax return. Pero yung isa lang yung fraudulent na na-declare, yung isa hindi, 'di ba? Let's say the husband filed his income documents fraudulently, but the wife did not. He presented her income document, in good faith. So pag na-audit yun at naka-incur sila ng penalty, pwedeng mag-file ng innocent spouse relief yung wife para hindi siya maging liable dun sa penalty. Kasi when you file MFJ, joint and severally liable kayo. Meaning, yung liability nun sa inyong dalawa. Right? But again, if only one spouse committed a fraud, then the other one can file an innocent spouse relief. Itong injured spouse relief naman, fraudulent pa din. Pero there is a case wherein kailangan ng ni IRS ng i-garnish yung income, right? I-garnish your income or i-offset yung liability, yung refund against a prior year liability, no, ng taxpayer. Kasi pala, not necessarily fraudulent, but yung tax hindi binayaran. So let's say nag-file sila ng 2023 tax return, timely naman, pero hindi pa rin binayaran yung tax due, 'di ba? So it will remain there for forever kung hindi nila binayaran, 'di ba? Or actually, may 6 months pala to collect 6 years to 10 years na may time si IRS to collect the tax. Pag hindi nag-collect si IRS ng 10 years, expired na yung liability mo. Hindi na pwedeng habulin yan ni IRS. So, nangyari ganyan, 2023, may tax due yung mag-asawa, hindi binayaran. Right? But, yung wife, hindi siya kasama doon kasi dapat wala siyang tax liability kasi yung income niya may withholding, right? So, mangyayari the following year kasi may liability sila and then nag-file sila ng 2024 and it so happened na tax refund sila ng 2024 kasi maraming deduction siguro or may over withholding yung employer. So kung may refund sila ng 2024, pero may tax due sila ng 2023 na hindi nila binayaran, ang tendency niyan, hindi mag-i-issue ng refund si IRS for 2024 kasi i-offset yan sa tax due nila ng 2023. Diba? Kasi may utang ka pa nga sa IRS, ba't kami mag-refund sa'yo? Ganun yung logic nun. So, kung si spouse ay gusto niya makareceive ng refund kasi, she's entitled to that. Yung husband lang naman niya yung hindi nang bayad ng right amount of tax. Pwede din siyang mag-file ng injured spouse relief para makuha niya yung refund na para sa kanya. So, how do you know these things na magkano dapat yung liability ni spouse at ni husband at saka ni spouse? When you enter a document in the tax return, pwede din naman kasing hindi gawin to. Pero may mga client na very particular. So what you do saan na yung sample ko? Where is that thing? Is it this? This. So for example, you're entering a W-2. Why is it not coming? Right. So for example, you're entering a W-2. You will indicate that that W-2 is for the spouse. If you don't indicate that this is for a spouse, it will be as if it's gonna default to the husband. So this is a W-2 for the husband. But if you're looking at the spouses or the wife's W-2, you have to indicate, or you have put a tick mark here, so that all that income and all the withholding will be attributed to the spouse, right? Because some tax software, I'm not sure if it's available in ProConnect, but we can explore it later. You can have a version of a return MFJ or MFS. And when you do MFS, it's as if they file separately. So nakaseparate yung income ni husband at saka ni spouse, magkano yung tax due ni husband, magkano yung tax due ni spouse. Right? But magpa-file pa rin sila ng MFJ. Yung software lang yung nagba-bifurcate nung dalawang income ng dalawang spouse. Right? Just so they know their position. You know what I mean? So, pagka later on may mga issues, pwede nilang balikan yung isa't isa na, hey, yung tax due na yan was actually yours because I was on a refund position. Right? But because pag kinumbine natin yung income natin, mas malaki yung tax due mo kaysa sa refund ko, kinain yung refund ko at naging tax due tayo overall. Right? And because yung tax due natin hindi mo binayaran, ngayon may refund ako this year, hindi ko makaka-receive ng refund dahil in-apply yung refund ko sa tax due natin ng the prior year, where in fact wala naman akong share dun sa tax due na yon. So ako na spouse, I'm injured, I can file an injured spouse relief so I can get my refund. And the IRS has a way of knowing if you are indeed due a refund because makikita nila to sa filing na yung income mo was labeled as such in the return. You know what I mean? Kasi when you file a return, pwede niyo nung hindi i-check itong spouse, it doesn't matter. Hindi kayo magkaka-diagnostics, walang error na magpa-prompt, and hindi rin makikita ni taxpayer kung yung income na yan ay nakatag ba sa spouse. Sa 1040 na form na ibibigay natin, hindi nila makikita yan. And again, it's not necessary. But may mga issues na it can help. So how it helps, pag may mga complaints about injured spouse or analytical purposes lang ni spouse. May mga ganong taxpayer na hindi naman madalas, like 5% of the taxpayer, may ganon. Can we have a version of an MFS return? Just so we know how much we're earning and how much we should be liable. But madalas, they don't really care. Kaya madalas hindi to na-appreciate yung pag-i-indicate kung yung income na yan ay sa taxpayer ba or sa spouse. And it's not just W-2. My team can attest to this. It's not just W-2. It could be a broker statement. It could be a 1099-R for retirement. It could be a dividend or interest. Pwedeng hindi yan naka-label as taxpayer or spouse. Automatic yan magiging joint income. Pero again, if we are making a separate analysis, it would be nice, it would be ideal to put that as a taxpayer or a spouse income. Naka-designate dapat. I'll show you. For example, at the 1099-R. So same, 1099-R, you would still need to indicate whether that's for the spouse, right? So these are easy to miss. But, you know, a reviewer looks at this kasi alam nila anong impact niyan, anong yung possible impact niyan, right? So kasi pag you're in haste, again, these are easy to miss. Like pag nakita niyo ng W2, diretso na kayong W2, hindi niyo natingnan kaninong W2 ba yan, sa spouse ba yan or sa taxpayer, right? That's why it's really important to be thorough. Isang quality ng isang tax preparer is dapat thorough tayo. No? Tinitingnan natin yung bawat detalye ng isang tax document. Kasi kung hindi, pag nagpa-review tayo sa reviewer natin, okay sana kung one time lang na-miss, no? Pero kung madalas yung nami-miss yung mga ganun, ay baka ma-terminate kayo. May mga ganong cases na hina-hire sila ng tax preparer out ng firm, isang tax season, after tax season, hindi na sila hina-hire ulit. That could be the case wherein there's a lot of errors and mistakes in the tax return. And you don't want to be that. All right? So just let me know if you have any clarification.
Ask as part of our preliminary work to prepare tax.
Be done with this.
Cover head of household filing status too. The other way around. If a marriage doesn't just mean filing together, scary proposition if you have some distrust between spouses, but the tax code does have some relief. Injured spouse joint, which is married filing. All right, so we've mentioned this filing status alternative to married filing joint, which is married filing separate. So we'll learn about that in a different study unit, how filing status impacts various aspects of the tax return. Married filing separate, each spouse needs to track their own income, their own deductions, their own credits. And this gets kind of interesting when it comes to jointly owned property. So let's say that a married filing separate couple both own a home, but only one spouse pays the property tax on the home from their funds. Technically, either spouse would be entitled to take the tax paid deduction. We also mentioned earlier that in the event one spouse passes away, a married filing.
So another option for married people to file is to file separately. So, ganito yan, kapag pwedeng hindi pa naman sila divorce or hindi sila divorce at all, but it's beneficial for one to file separately because he would, I mean, especially kung makakakuha ng refund yung isa, it could be one reason. Say for example, si wife, may over withholding yung employer niya. So, possible makakuha siya ng refund. Pero kung mag-file sila ng joint because malaki yung tax liability ni husband, syempre kakainin yung kaniyang tax refund. I-offset doon sa tax due nilang mag-asawang combined income. So they can choose to do married filing separately. And one thing to note, pag yung husband ay nag-file married filing separately at yung deduction niya is standard, then the wife should also file married filing separately as standard deduction. Later on, we will tackle standard and itemized deduction, but that's one thing to note. Dapat magkapareho sila ng deduction type, standard or itemized. Hindi pwedeng itemized yung isa, then standard yung isa. Okay. So of course, like what he said, meron silang bahay, but kasi pag dito sa America, if you say may bahay sila, nakabili sila ng bahay, they don't really pay cash, di ba? I mean, nobody pay except kung celebrity ka. Or even celebrities, they don't pay cash pag bumibili sila ng bahay. So, they pay mortgage every month. They pay mortgage and then that comes with an interest. And at the end of the year, they get a mortgage statement called 1098. So, makikita dun sa 1098 kung sino ang nagbabayad ng mortgage, kung kanino nakapangalan yung property. Right? So, it would be helpful kung sino yung nagbayad, siya yung makaklaim ng deduction. Diba? So, kapag kasi interest, walang limit yun in terms of deduction. So, kung bagong bili yung bahay, syempre malaki yung interest. Pag, let's say, umabot yung interest ng 30,000, malaking tulong yun sa deduction ng taxpayer, right? So what he says, what the speaker says here, kung sino yung nagbayad ng mortgage, siya dapat yung makakuha ng deduction. Pero kung 50-50 naman sila, dapat 50-50 split din. Yeah, that's for MFS.
Separate couple both own a home, but only one spouse pays the property tax on the home. Earlier that in the event one spouse passed away, either spouse would be entitled to take the tax paid deduction. We also mentioned earlier that in the event one spouse passes away and the surviving spouse does not remarry before the end of the year, they would still qualify to file married filing a joint return. Keep in mind that this is for the year in which the spouse passes away. For 2 years after the year of passing, the surviving spouse may be eligible for the qualifying surviving spouse filing status. The taxpayer must meet a couple of criteria. They can't have remarried during the year. They would have qualified for married filing joint had the spouse not passed away. And they must have maintained a household. So what's a household? A household in this case means maintaining a household for a qualifying dependent. We'll talk about dependents shortly, and you'll see this is an even tighter definition limited to son or daughter, stepson or stepdaughter, or an adopted child. We've also...
Right, so shortly we'll just cover this. This is not very common, qualifying surviving spouse. Kasi di naman, every year may namamatay or something like that. So, but it's nice to cover this. Qualified lang to sa mga, pwede lang to sa mga taxpayer na 2 years after namatay yung spouse and hindi naman sila nag-remarry, they can file a qualifying surviving spouse, and the deduction for this is the same as the married filing jointly, right? And there are conditions though. Dapat and one of the important condition there is that they must have a dependent. Meaning, kung wife ka, namatay yung husband mo, and you have a dependent, and you maintain that household, you can still file, kasi technically single ka na, di ba? Kasi namatay yung spouse mo. On the year na namatay yung spouse mo, pwede ka pang mag-married filing jointly. Okay? Say 2024, namatay yung spouse. You can file married filing jointly. But 2025 and 2026, you can file as qualifying surviving spouse, provided that you have a dependent. Pero kung namatay yung asawa mo at kahit hindi ka nagpakasal ulit, wala kayong dependent, you cannot qualify as a QSS. You will have to file a single because technically you're already single and you cannot qualify as a qualifying surviving spouse. Copy?
Definition limited to son or daughter, stepson or stepdaughter, or an adopted child. We've also mentioned head of household, so let's take a look at that too. Head of household status generally applies if the taxpayer is unmarried and does not fall under the qualifying surviving spouse filing status. There are some exceptions when a taxpayer is technically still married, but is living apart from their spouse for the entire year and would otherwise have met the head of household filing criteria. So what's the criteria? The taxpayer must furnish more than half the costs of maintaining a household during the tax year. Qualifying costs or expenditures are listed in your GLIME knowledge transfer outline, along with some great examples of what costs do not qualify. The household must have been the principal place of abode for more than half the year for either a qualifying child or a qualifying relative. We'll cover these two classifications in more detail later. There are two special rules. First, a taxpayer's parent meets the definition of a dependent if that parent is not necessarily living in the household. So think about a situation like a nursing home. Second, in the case of, let's say, a divorce where the kids live with one parent, also known as the custodial parent, but the other parent, called the non-custodial parent, is allowed to claim the kids as dependents pursuant to the divorce decree. The non-custodial parent may still qualify for the head of household filing status using Form 8332. Okay, finally, if the taxpayer's the custodial parent.
Right. So head of household. This is for single individual, so unmarried. And it's useful because it has a higher deduction than a single filer. So head of household ka kung you maintain a household and you pay 50% to maintain that household and may dependent ka. So sino yung dependent mo? It could be your child or it could be a relative. And like what he said, kung parent mo, hindi necessarily na nakatira yung parent mo sa'yo, but if you furnish 50% of the needs of that parent, whether that parent is in a nursing house or even abroad, but if you, and that parent has a social security number, you can claim that as a dependent for as long as you provide 50% of the needs of that parent. Okay? And yun, kung divorce kayo, hindi nakatira sa'yo yung kid mo, nasa wife mo, for example, but you furnish 50% of his needs, and nag-sign naman yung wife mo ng Form 8332, kahit hindi nakatira sa'yo yung kid mo, you can still file that as your dependent, and then you can file as a head of household. Yun yung logic ng head of household. Hindi siya straightforward. There are conditions for you to be able to file as a head of household. And why do people choose head of household? Is because of the higher deduction that it has as compared to filing single. And again, the amounts of the deductions related to these filing statuses, we will cover on a separate lesson because there is a different section in the 1040 called standard deductions. That's where we will tackle them.
But the other parent, called the non-custodial parent, is allowed to claim the kids as dependents pursuant to the divorce decree. The non-custodial parent may still qualify for the head of household filing status using Form 8332. Okay, finally, if the taxpayer is unmarried, does not qualify for any other filing status, the taxpayer will file as single. So that wraps up the various filing status definitions for taxpayers. Onward and upward. Thanks for watching.
All right, thank you. So that's for the filing statuses. How many are there? How many are there?
Right.
Right, correct. So there are 5 filing statuses. What are they? MFJ, MFS, QSS, HOH, and single. Kung hindi apat, wala sa apat, single. Diba? Madali lang yung tandaan. Kung hindi, wala sa apat, single. So, yan yung dapat nating tandaan. And why do we know this? Why do we have to know this? Because may tawag dito, may mga naka-attach na numbers doon sa filing status na yon. Iba ang standard deduction ng MFS, MFJ, QSS, HOH at single. And of course, you would not want to, incorrectly file a return na dapat pala MFJ pero final mo MFS. Or dapat pala MFS pero final mo MFJ. Diba? So, how do you know these things? Balikan mo yung tax organizer. Balikan mo yung prior tax return. Okay? Hindi ka pwedeng mag-assume na just because dalawa silang nasa return ay MFJ na agad yan. Okay? Copy? At kung confused kayo kung anong dapat yung tax, kung nagtatanong yung taxpayer, ano ba dapat yung tax filing status ko, then you have to go back to the definition. Kasi like for example, single siya. Tatanong siya, pwede ba akong mag-HOH? Kasi meron akong dependent. So balikan mo yung mga definition. Ano ba yung dependent? Meron ba siyang household? Diba? So hindi ka pwedeng, kung just because may dependent ka, hindi naman qualified yung dependent mo, mag-head of household ka na agad. Diba? So you still have to understand the definition of each of those filing statuses. Okay. So, pagka ganyan, for example, may namatay yung spouse. Just because namatay last year, agad ipafile mo siya single. No. Kasi pasok pa siya sa 2 years, di ba? So, QSS yung piliin mo. Di ba? It helps that you know these things para mapili mo yung proper filing status na ilalagay mo sa tax return. And remember, you are the one inputting that into the software kung bagong client. Kasi pag hindi, automatic again, yung filing status will flow from the prior year return. Okay. So I guess we're good. We've covered 2 things today. We're very productive, I would say. And I'm glad that, still a lot of people stay, even if it's already late in the evening your time. But we want to make the most of the time that we have. It's a weekend for me and for you guys. I know some of you are still going to be working tomorrow, so it's late. 11 is late. But while we have it, we make the most out of the time, because after this I will be traveling, right? So the schedule can be crazy, and we may not be able to meet as much time as possible. So yeah, that's it. If you have any question, just please feel free to type in and then unmute yourself. We still have 3 minutes. So about HOH po, does the IRS ask for the amount of household maintenance costs for the year? But how do they know if the taxpayer is telling the truth? Are the taxpayer required to keep receipts of these expenses? The answer to that is no. We don't require them to provide the cost. We take their word for it. If they say they maintain 50%, like they provide for the needs, for the basic needs, for education, for rent, we take their word for it, and we advise them that if in case there are issues later on, that the IRS will audit your return because they don't seem to believe that you're a head of household, you advise them to keep the receipts or proofs to them with them, so that they can show that to the IRS. But we don't ask them for these receipts, so that we can keep them in our possession. Because again, when the client gets audited, ang responsibility niyan is with the taxpayer, not with us. But we can proactively say, if you can provide us with the receipt, and we can keep that for you, but we're not required. So pag sinabi nilang head of household sila, and sinabi nila na they're paying for this, we take their word for it. Okay, ganun yun. Bye guys.